right, I'm going to get us started, and I want to welcome everyone. My name is Aaliyah Wessela. I am here on behalf of the Continuing Education Office at the School of Social Work to share at the beginning of this session what you will need to do in order to get CE credit today. So it's pretty simple. We will need you to simply stay for the duration of the session today. We'll be running for 1 hour, and there will be polls that pop up throughout the session today, and we ask that you participate in all of those to indicate that you've been attentive to the session, that you've been staying with us the whole time. So please do respond to all those polls. If you do have a question or an issue with the poll response process, you're welcome to submit your response in the chat instead. We are not going to be able to hear you throughout the session, as you can see probably on the slides. We will be available to you via the chat. You can direct any chat comments to the panelists and to myself. If you have a question about CE, I can address those. If you're having a tech issue, I can address those. And we've also got the whole program evaluation group team on to help address any other questions you might have. So please direct any questions you have for the presenter about the content of the presentation into the Q&A box. We will be getting to those at the end of the session today. So if you have a specific question for Kathyn, who's our main speaker today, please direct those there. Otherwise, comments can go in the chat. Some of you may have noticed that there is live captioning available today. You will notice it is not perfect. And if you would like to not see the captioning, you can opt to turn it on or off. So whatever your preference is, if you like the captions, go ahead, keep them on. If they're distracting, feel free to turn them off. And then I think, yes, and we want to let you know that the recording and the slides will be shared after today's presentation. So without further ado, I want to pass this over to the program evaluation group who will be running today's session. So you can find me in the chat if you have any questions about CE.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah. My name is Shauna Lee. I'm director of the Program Evaluation Group, or PEG as we affectionately refer to it. First, a few quick words about PEG. Our team of professional evaluation associates and student interns conducts community-based evaluation with partners throughout the state of Michigan and nationally. We work with small organizations and large organizations to write evaluation plans, conduct evaluation, and report back those results to funders and communities. We're especially focused on equity-based evaluation approaches, valuing the authentic voice of our partners as experts in all of our work. And we're here to consult with you about your evaluation needs, so please, anytime, feel free to reach out to us, me, Lisa, Greco, who you'll meet in a few minutes, or any of our evaluation associates. And I just want to thank the Continuing Education Office, including Aaliyah, for all of their hard work and helping us put together our first ever PEG webinar. We're so grateful for their support. Thank you, Aaliyah. And thanks to all of you as well for joining us today, recognizing that many of us are working from home during this challenging time, and it's difficult to make space for a webinar. We really appreciate and are deeply grateful for your attendance and are delighted to have so many of you here. We also would like to acknowledge that we appreciate the opportunity to connect with you today on Juneteenth, the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. So we want to acknowledge that, as well as we have a statement regarding the land that our University of Michigan stands on as well, to acknowledge the commitment that we have to acknowledging our space and the space that we take up and the communities that we work with. Part of our mission at PEG is to be in partnership with community organizations in service of creating a more equitable, caring, and socially just society. So to that end, we hope that this series of evaluation basics that we're starting today lends some support to your efforts, strengthens your capacity to live your mission, and provides you with some tools to help tell the story of your impact as an organization. So thank you again for joining us. I would like to introduce the speaker today, who is an evaluation associate at the Program Evaluation Group, Kathyn Colasanti, who is she's a highly skilled evaluator with over 10 years of evaluation experience, working with many organizations in Michigan to conduct a range of research and evaluation projects related to community development, food systems, and public health. So thank you, Kathyn. Thanks again to all of you. I'm going to hand the mic over to Kathyn to introduce our webinar series and start today's session.
Great, thank you so much, Shauna. And again, really happy to have all of you here. I'm always excited to be around people that are into data, right? I think we're going to be in good company today. I think you all are aspiring data nerds like me. So thanks for joining us. And I'll just say I am presenting today's session, but putting together the content was really a team effort. So all of us at the Program Evaluation Group pitched in, and everyone, like Aaliyah said, is going to be behind the scenes helping answer your questions. Some at the end we'll save, and some as we go. So feel free to keep the questions coming. So here is where we're heading today. Shauna shared a little bit about who we are as a group, but we'd love to know a little bit about you all. So we're going to start with a couple polls to just get a little bit of introduction information from you all. And then we'll dive in. So I'll cover conducting virtual interviews in focus groups, choosing between survey platforms, how to create a survey in Google Forms, and then we'll end with distributing surveys via text message. So here is our first poll question. Where do you live in Michigan? And there's 10 different regions up on the screen there. So you can select which region you live in. And if you're not in Michigan, please let us know what state you are in the chat box. So we'll give folks a minute or so to complete this question. Okay, I'm seeing 74, 75% voted. We'll just give it another few seconds here, get in a few more responses.
We've got a few responses in the chat. We've got folks coming in from DC, from Oakland, California,
Great.
Indiana, Philadelphia.
All right. Well, welcome from wherever you are.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okay. So we have folks from, oh, we're missing region 3, but we have 9 of 10 regions represented and a whole bunch of other states, which is awesome. So again, welcome from wherever you are. So let's go now to our next question, which is, what sector best describes your affiliation? And I'll note here, Zoom limits us to only 10 options. So we don't have every sector here. I'm sure we didn't get everyone. If we missed your sector, don't take it personally. But we'd love to know how you affiliate, and you can include that in the chat box. Okay, we're getting faster. I see we're already at 80%.
All right. Give it a second. I don't think our panelists are responding to the question, so I think that is some of the gap.
Okay.
I'm seeing.
Yeah, they're off the hook. We know where they're from.
I'm going to wrap up the poll.
Okay, great. Okay, we see community development, a lot of healthcare, public health folks, great education, kind of a mix. Awesome. Well, thanks all for sharing that. And we'll do one last question, which is, what is your experience level with evaluation? So we're just curious how you would describe your experience level from novice, beginner, competent, proficient to expert. And seeing a lot of beginner responses come in. Yeah, and again, if you want to use a different adjective for your experience level, you can throw that in the chat box. Okay, great. So just under half said beginner, which is great because that's about the level that we targeted this presentation. But hopefully, regardless of what level you're at, you will find useful information here. So thank you all for sharing a little bit about who you are. So let's dive in here. So just real quick, this is some of the literature we reviewed in preparing for today's presentation. All of the titles that are in bold are open access. As we noted at the beginning, we'll be sending out the slide deck afterwards, so you can refer back to any of this literature if you would be interested in doing so. So just real quick overall, using technology to collect data, it's something that has become more necessary in this time of social distancing. But really, regardless of the circumstances, there are a lot of advantages. You know, you can reach people from wherever you are to wherever they are, much like we're doing on this session today. You know, we couldn't pull in people from Philadelphia to an in-person meeting. So that is a huge advantage, and it's convenient in terms of the time necessary and the cost associated. You can just get faster responses, both in terms of your ability to set up a session or get out a survey tool, people's ability to respond and participate, and also the ability to code or input the data is generally faster. However, internet access is required in most all cases, which not everyone has. And also you do need your respondents to have some familiarity with technology generally. So those are definitely some considerations depending on who you're trying to reach. So looking at virtual interviews and focus groups in particular, again, reaching people in different locations and pulling people from different locations into the same virtual space is a really great advantage. Generally less disruptive to people's schedules in terms of being able to participate. Recording is built right in to most all of the platforms, so that's really convenient. You don't need a separate device. And then file and screen sharing is also an advantage that might be helpful for the moderator, might be helpful for participants to be able to share an image of what they're describing. In the research we reviewed, we found really mixed findings with regards to whether or not video platforms were conducive to allowing people to pick up on nonverbal cues. Also mixed findings in terms of whether participants were likely to be more or less comfortable than in person. Some of the research said participants might be more comfortable talking about experiences in their own home, and some indicated maybe less so. Same with building rapport with a moderator. Some found that worked really well in video platforms, and others found out not so well. But for sure, I would say video platforms are the next best thing, at least, to in-person. And definitely, it's going to be easier to establish rapport and pick up on nonverbal cues than a phone-based conversation. Disadvantages, you need not just internet access, but generally need stable, high-speed internet access in order to have enough bandwidth to have decent audio and video quality. And generally, a lot of the video platforms are going to work better with a laptop or a desktop rather than a mobile device. And then another thing to be aware of is some of the platforms might store and analyze data in cooperation with intelligence agencies and law enforcement. So I would say certainly if you're talking about sensitive subjects or illegal behaviors of any kind, I would steer towards in-person conversations whenever possible. There's lots of video platforms available, and I'm sure all of you have become much more familiar with these platforms in the last few months. I know I certainly have. One other thing to note is we did review one article where an interview was conducted through an instant message platform. So that's another consideration. I'm not going to spend much time talking about that today, but could work really nicely if you want to protect the anonymity of the people that you're talking with. So some advantages and disadvantages here, and these came from this article cited at the bottom of the screen, where participants in a Zoom-based focus group shared what they felt were the advantages and disadvantages. So generally people felt like it was really a great way to establish rapport and pick up on nonverbal cues, was pretty easy to use, was convenient, but some people did experience technical difficulties relating to low internet bandwidth or outdated hardware. And so that can happen on any of the video platforms, so it's certainly something to be aware of. And to that end, some strategies and tips if you're going to be conducting a virtual interview and focus group. It might be a good idea to provide an instruction sheet or checklist to people to just spell out really clearly how to access the platform, what type of hardware is needed, what type of browser, what type of internet bandwidth, those types of details. Asking participants to log on early is a good idea, and you have some time to troubleshoot if anything comes up. It's really helpful if the moderator is familiar with the technology and can help people solve any technical difficulties, or if not the moderator, someone else available in that role. Best practice that I'm sure most of you have become more familiar with, asking participants to mute their microphone when not speaking, helps minimize background noise. And then for the moderator, just finding a quiet space to also, again, minimize background noise. Might need to speak a little more slowly, more clearly than you would in person, just to compensate for any audio quality issues. And then another strategy we came across was to hold a kind of mini session in advance of the main focus group as a way to collect some initial demographic data. And that's also a good opportunity to build rapport and to troubleshoot any technology issues that come up. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the particular features of Zoom, which tends to be one of the most widely used of the video platforms. So on the left, you see the features of the free version. One of the main limitations is that 40-minute time limit on meetings with more than 2 people. But you do have an unlimited number of meetings, which is great, and it can host up to 100 people. If you use the paid version, an advantage is you can have multiple hosts, so have multiple people who are kind of controlling the settings behind the scene, and then you have unlimited time for large group meetings. So I'm moving fast. Let's pause for a second, quick pulse check. How are you feeling so far? Confused, overwhelmed, relaxed, engaged, excited? And if none of those adjectives resonate with you, tell us how you're feeling in the chat box. And I'll just say too, as you all are filling out this poll question, I've tried to build out this slide deck to be a reference that you will be able to refer back to after the session. So there's a lot of content, and I won't be able to read every word on every slide, and you probably won't be able to catch every word on every slide, but just know that you'll have the slide deck afterwards and can refer back to it later. All right, engaged, more than half. Awesome, and relaxed, great. Only a little bit of confusion and overwhelming, so hopefully we'll clear up some of that confusion as we keep going. Great, so moving now to electronic surveys. I'm a huge fan of moving from pen and paper surveys to electronic surveys. Much more convenient, I think, on all sides. And just saves time, again, reaching people anywhere. And just generally speaking, higher data quality in that you can set up your survey to only allow for certain types of responses, which can be really useful. And then your data is already there and you don't have to input it manually afterwards. Disadvantages, it's easier for people to just put off or forget about. So one tip, if you have the resources, is send out a postcard with the link to the survey, because it can be helpful for people to have something physical in front of them. Also, less room for participant feedback, and that's kind of the flip side of the higher data quality where we're constraining responses to a certain type, but that also means people don't have as much room to just sort of write all over the question about how they're feeling or write in response choices that you didn't think of. So I'm going to talk about 3 different survey platforms, which tend to be among the most common: SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics, and Google Forms. So starting with the basic free version of SurveyMonkey. So you have an unlimited number of surveys that you can do, which is great. However, you can only have a maximum of 10 questions per survey and 100 responses per survey. So it's not going to work so well for large surveys, right? Also, some more limitations in the customization and template options than you would have in the paid version. So on the premium version, you could upload your own logo, remove the SurveyMonkey branding. Excuse me. More templates and designs to choose from, more collaboration options, more question types, and more branching and randomization options. Google Forms is a free platform, and it's pretty robust for being a free platform. There's no limit to the number of surveys or the number of questions or the number of responses, which is great. But you can't remove the Google branding, and you do have some limitations on collaboration options and your customization of the design. Oops. All right, so this is Qualtrics, which also has a free version. Although I will note the free version is intended to be a trial to convince you to purchase the license. So you might get a lot of promo if you sign up for that. But it has some pretty decent options. So 1 active survey at a time, so that is an important limitation, and 15 questions per survey. And you do have a specific range of question types, so some of the more common question types that are available. Another important thing, you cannot export the data, so you'd be limited to looking at the reporting features that are built into the Qualtrics platform. You can't export it to Excel or another data analysis software. Qualtrics Premium does give you a lot more options in terms of question type, in terms of how you can customize the survey. You can access it through a mobile application. If you're on a tablet, you could go out to a community event and have someone fill out a survey right there on the spot, and then when you're back in the office with internet access, upload it. So that can be super helpful. More conditional logic available, can translate into different languages and export your data, which again, that might be an important part. So just to kind of summarize some of the key features and limitations and the cost associated, I have this table. So again, SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics both offer a free version, but their paid versions are more powerful. So key takeaways: Google Forms is a great free program for simple surveys. It's very popular and pretty robust for what it is. SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics are better for more complex surveys. And then data visualization is going to be better on your paid versions of the platform. Also collaboration with multiple researchers and customization of themes and logos and all of that stuff is going to be better on premium versions. So moving now into how to create a survey in Google Forms. So again, this part's going to be a lot of content. I'm going to move through it quickly, but once you have the slide deck, and you'll be able to just follow along step by step if you want to do that to create your own survey. So you're going to go to Google Forms. You're going to start a new form, click that plus button. And then you want to type in a name of your survey. You can also type in some additional text to describe your survey. And I'll note Google Forms is also great for RSVP forms. If you're not already using it for that purpose, I found it really helpful for that. And then you start by entering a survey question. So you're going to actually type the text of your question. And if you don't want it to be a multiple choice question, which is what it's going to default to, you can hit that down arrow. And this will bring up this box where you can change it to a different type of question, whether it's short answer, check boxes, which is check all that apply, etc. And then you will actually type in your answer choices. So however many answer choices you have to that question, you just keep typing, it will keep adding. And then to add a new question, you hit that plus button. And that's part one. So that's creating the survey questions. So I'm also going to just quickly cover inserting skip logic. So skip logic is also called conditional branching or branch logic. And so this is when, depending on how somebody answers a question, you send them to one place in the survey or a different place. So what you're going to do is hit this equal sign type button, which will allow you to add a section. And then the 3 dots at the bottom corner. And then you're going to select this, go to section based on answer. And then with this down arrow is where you're going to select what you want, where in the survey you want someone to be sent based on their response. So we're going to say if someone says no to attending the training, we're just going to have them submit the form. We don't need to ask how they felt about the training, whether they liked it, because they weren't there. So they're just going to submit the form. Great. Have a nice day. So that is skip logic. And then I'll cover just briefly how to navigate the settings. So there are a few options up at the top where you can customize the theme. So you'll hit that artist palette button, and that will bring up different color options. You can also choose an image to add in to the form, whether that's your logo or a photograph, whatever it is. The gear button is going to bring up settings, and that is going to allow you to modify the functionality of your survey. So whether or not you want email addresses to be collected, whether you want to limit people to only one response, whether people can edit what they have said after they have submitted, and then whether you want people to be able to see summary charts of other people's responses. And then this I button is where you preview. So this is super important. So after you have put together your survey tool, you want to be sure to preview it, and that will allow you to see what it actually will look like for the people who are responding. So make sure to hit preview and just make sure that the survey is going to look exactly how you want it to look. And then the send button will allow you to send it to survey participants, and there's a few options to do that. I think the best way is just to copy the link and then send it out from your own email address, just since people are more likely to respond to something that comes from someone that they know or a name they recognize at least. And then you watch your responses come in. So you'll hit the response button up at the top, and then you can either look through responses individually. So for one respondent, go just question by question, how that person answered, or in aggregate, and the platform will automatically put together some graphs and charts based on the aggregate responses. So Google Forms in 5 minutes. Second pulse check. Let's pause. How are you feeling? Okay, I'm still seeing engaged and relaxed. Awesome. A little bit of confusion, but we're doing pretty well on time. So we should have a good chunk of time at the end to hopefully clear up any lingering confusion. Okay, 51% engaged, 39% relaxed. I didn't put hungry up there. Hopefully you all have lunch with you if you're in that state. All right, thanks. And I think we're doing okay. So again, yeah, we'll get to more of the questions at the end. So last section here, text messaging surveys. So text message surveys are great for reaching people on the go. So anyone who's not sitting in front of a computer all day, I think it's going to be probably more likely to respond to a text message survey. So super convenient. And research also shows that certain demographics are more likely to respond to text message surveys. So younger people, people that identify as female, people of color, in the research we reviewed, all were more likely to be responsive to a text message than an email survey. But overall, what we saw is comparable response rates with other survey modalities. Generally, it's going to work really well, I think, for rapid feedback, like maybe right after a training, right after an event, you send out a quick message. Here are 5 questions. What did you think? How did it go? Kind of thing. They're not going to work as well for long surveys or in-depth questions. People aren't going to want to type long paragraphs on their phone. But again, really great for short and sweet. And then text message rates may apply depending on phone plans that people have. So we reviewed 13 different text message survey platforms. And these 3 here, Survey Sparrow, SoGo Survey, and Wire2Air, were the 3 that we were able to access and conduct a trial survey without paying. So I'm going to share a little bit about each of these platforms. So Survey Sparrow, first of all, with the free version of their plan, you can collect up to 1,200 responses per year and have up to 10 questions per survey. And there are some data visualization and reporting options available. With the paid version, and what we're showing you are the features of the cheapest paid version, you can have unlimited number of questions and unlimited number of responses. Can get a little bit more complex in terms of that logic or conditional branching that we talked about, and more options for how you share out the survey. Next is SoGo Survey. So with the free version, you're limited to only 200 responses per year, but you have unlimited questions per survey. And then 15 total surveys that you could create per year. Now with the paid version, you're unlimited in the number of surveys. And again, it's more customizable in terms of the look and feel and can include more skip logic. One super cool thing, nonprofits can access that paid plan for free if they go through a registration process. And then I believe you have to renew that registration each year just to verify your nonprofit status. But I think that is an awesome opportunity. And then the third one we looked at is called Wire2Air. Now this one is based on credits. So essentially the more characters and the more messages you send out, the more you have to pay. And it's set up a little differently. So as opposed to a link to a survey that the first 2 had, this one asks you to kind of text back and forth. So you send out a text message that said, you know, where do you live, A, B, or C, and then somebody would text back B, kind of thing. And I will note in our internal testing of this one, it didn't quite function perfectly. So definitely if you're intrigued by this platform, I would give it a fair bit of testing before sending it out. The process for creating a text message survey is pretty intuitive on all the platforms. It's going to be similar to what we went through with Google Forms, where you're creating your survey questions, choosing the type of question, adding in the response choices. And then there are a few different options for how that gets sent out. So just sort of summarizing what we saw across these platforms. Again, with our internal testing, one of the questions we were asking internally was how easy people thought that the survey platform was to use. And the first two, Survey Sparrow and SoGo Survey, everyone thought was really easy to use and just very intuitive and nice user interface. Survey Sparrow integrates directly with Google Sheets. So that's handy if you're used to looking at data in Google Sheets. SoGo Survey integrates directly with Excel. So another consideration there. So I think I flew through that. That's the content I had, but I'm seeing lots of chats come in and I haven't been able to read them. So Lisa or Shauna, can I turn it to you to see what's been popping up in the chat box?
Sure. I can start off with a question, and I'd encourage people to please ask any questions as well. We've gotten a few through the chat and a few through the Q&A, but we'd love to get more. So if you have questions or if you have experiences for how you've used these platforms, because some people are indicating in the chat what has worked for them in the past, and that's actually really, really helpful information. So we'll pull some of that together. But one question we have here is, so someone's moving their in-person training online. And actually we were in a very similar position at PEG in one of our projects, an in-person training set of actually kind of a curriculum over multiple months was moved to an online format, you know, very unexpectedly. So we had to adapt. Maybe Elizabeth can speak to some of the things we did in that in a minute. But this person asks, what are some recommendations or suggestions for having the survey completed after completing an online training? So I guess in this case, you're not really having a lot of in-person contact with the people who are participating in the training. It's all online. This person needs to gather the data for auditing. So any thoughts or ideas on that from Kathyn or the rest of the team?
Yeah, I think sending it out either during or immediately after your training will really help with response rate. You know, probably just while you have a captive audience, you know, while you have people's attention, while the training is fresh in their mind. It might even work to do kind of a hybrid like we've done today and ask some questions as polls and then some other questions in another format, Google survey or a different survey link, and that you could put in the chat box at the end of your training, and even build in time to your agenda, say end 10 minutes early and say, okay, we're sending everyone to this link in order to complete the evaluation now. So those would be my suggestions. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yes. So I believe like it depends on the platform in which you're moving the training to as well. So if it's a WebEx training, you should be able to have the link to if you have like a pre-post survey or assessment. However, you should be able to link it right into the WebEx. And then require that they complete that prior to moving on or prior to completing the session. So that's kind of a nice way to ensure that those pieces are getting met. So that's just another suggestion as well. So, but in terms of what happened with the moving from in-person to online was a lot of internal tracking. So we were able to work with our partner to identify who's completing the surveys and who is identified as completing the training. So are they working together? And if not, we need to capture those. And so, but for the next round, it's going to be built in, like I was just talked about that example around WebEx, is that those survey links will be going right into the training and need to be completed before and after they get the completion check for those sessions.
Actually, I have a quick question that might follow up to that is how do you think it would differ for asynchronous versus synchronous? So this terminology was actually quite unfamiliar to me prior to the pandemic, but I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, synchronous is the online training that you're doing like we are today, where everybody's online simultaneously and having roughly, you know, similar experiences and viewing the content in the same fashion, versus asynchronous would be recording the content for the online training, and then some participants would view that after the fact, or so everyone would be kind of having a different time when they're viewing it, a different potential location. Do you have thoughts on how you might think about those two environments differently if you were distributing a survey for the purposes of monitoring that training?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think it could be done similarly. So if you have a set of slides or resources that you're sending out as part of that asynchronous training, just include directly within that a link to the survey that you want to have people complete, and kind of try to frame it as a step, you know, as part of the agenda of that session that you're asking people to complete. And reminders are always good. Actually, we just, I just was part of another survey. I think we ended up sending out 4 reminders. And usually people are not grumpy or mad about that. They appreciate it and they'll say, yeah, I had that on my list, but hadn't gotten to it yet. So don't be shy to send out reminders, for sure. Anyone else at PEG have other thoughts on asynchronous?
I can take us to another question that came up in the
Okay,
Q&A.
great.
The question came up, and I'm not sure if our team researched this or not, but team weigh in, please. There was a question about whether or not data that is stored in these various applications, if we have an idea of which applications work in cooperation with government agencies. So I think that's a question about protection, privacy, and accessibility of the data. Any thoughts about that?
I'll take a first stab at that, and then others please add in. Just Wednesday, actually, of this week, so 2 days ago, Zoom announced that they would be offering encryption on their free version of the platform. So we had prepared this presentation, and I forgot to talk about encryption completely, but my initial version of that slide was saying that encryption was available in the paid version, but not in the free version. But they were getting enough pushback, I think, that they made that announcement just Wednesday. I'm not sure exactly what date they will be implementing that, but that is coming. So I think that is a really great addition to their free platform. The other platform that we looked at specifically was Skype, and the research article that we reviewed on that did say that that content could potentially be viewable by the platform owner and by intelligence agencies. So that's something to be aware of. So those are the only 2 I can speak to specifically, but anyone else on the team have other information?
I actually don't have a lot of, I think that was a really great point. I'm glad you brought it up, but I'm not all that sure. And I don't know actually how Google functions that way. I imagine that there's not a lot of privacy in a Google form, but maybe I'm a skeptic, but we do have a couple more questions though. If here in the Q&A, there were a lot of questions, or at least a few, about the sending, using text messages to just distribute surveys. And I do think this is kind of an exciting avenue to pursue. And so one question was, can you send Google surveys over text messaging? Someone else asked about sending links to a survey over text messaging. So I wondered if you would maybe speak to that for a moment, if you have strategies, suggestions, ideas about how best to distribute survey links.
Yeah, and I'll start, and then Matt, I would invite you to jump in here as well, since you did the most research on the text message survey platforms. But I think you could send any link to any survey platform over text message survey, but you might just have to do it automatically, right? You'd have to do it manually. Whereas the platforms that we talked about, it would be sent out automatically on your behalf. So you would give them, here's the list of 35 phone numbers or whatever it is, and then the platform distributes that message. So that's the real difference, rather than sending that out one by one. So I'm not aware that Google has that feature available, although I'm sure if they don't yet, they will try to develop it. Matt, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just echoing what you said. The two major platform survey, Sparrow and Sogo survey, like you said, once you get to the end of the survey, you simply publish it, choose a contact list if it's already created. If not, you have to enter the numbers one by one, but say you can import a contact list from wherever. And yeah, you just send out the text all in one step compared to sending each text, each individual number.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Another question that popped up in the Q&A was any feedback that the team might have regarding conducting surveys over the phone to address internet accessibility issues, just other accessibility issues where a phone survey might be a better way to go. Any sort of thoughts or reflections from the team on phone surveying?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, and certainly a way to reach people that don't have internet access. I think the challenge is if you're calling someone who doesn't know you. I don't know anybody that answers a phone that answers a call that comes from a number that they don't recognize, right? So I think that's a challenge, just getting people to pick up the phone. But I will say it's doable and it can be done. And some of our state level surveys that come from Department of Health and Human Services are administered by phone. And you can get access to mobile phone numbers as well. So it depends on the kind of survey you're doing. I think if you're surveying people that know your organization and then might know your phone number, at least your area code, you're more likely to have more people pick up the phone. I think if you're trying to do a random survey of residents in a particular area, I think you'll just have to budget for a lot of phone calls before you get through to somebody and then get somebody who's willing to complete your survey. Other thoughts?
So just be careful of what content you're asking over the phone. Folks may not be as comfortable sharing more personal or private information out loud and with somebody over the phone, where it might be more comfortable to write it out or feel like it's more anonymous if they're doing an online survey. So that's just another consideration.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We have a question about the IRB accepting the text-based platforms, and I could just jump in for a quick second on that, since you know, I spend an inordinate amount of time writing IRB applications. So my understanding, again, every IRB probably from institution to institution will do things slightly differently. It might have different privacy concerns or protocols that they require. But I haven't seen that the IRB reacts differently to surveys distributed based on the format, whether it's a Google form via email or a text. If someone has that experience, I'd love to hear it. But in my experience, they're open to that approach, so long as there's a rationale and then the appropriate privacy protections in place, et cetera. You know, sometimes you have to specify how many times you're going to follow up. Is it 1 time, 2 times, 10 times? There might be texting people 10 times might be deemed excessive. The Institutional Review Board is at the hospitals and universities, and basically if we're doing research or evaluation, we have to submit protocols for privacy and protection of human subjects. And so they will raise concerns, for example, if we're asking certain types of questions that are inappropriate, as Kate kind of spoke to, they might raise concerns about how much we're reaching out to people, et cetera. But so those application procedures can be challenging to work through. But as far as I've seen, text messaging is becoming a more and more common and accepted standard for delivering surveys to participants and to people. So I have not had an IRB issue specifically related to texting.
Yeah, and I'll just add in there, I think with all of those platforms that we spoke about, you could set it up so that phone numbers are either associated or not associated with the responses. Just like with Google Forms, you can set it up so either you're collecting email addresses or not collecting email addresses as part of the responses. So that is something that would probably be reassuring to IRBs if you say we're setting it up so that we won't be associating cell phone numbers with the responses. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Ask one more question that I think is a really interesting one. I don't know that there's one answer to this question, but it was about the length of surveys. You know, so sort of when do people get fatigued by doing texting surveys that are administered via text? So maybe they're doing them on their phone, online surveys, etc. I don't know there's one answer to that, but I will chime in that I'm guilty of doing very long online surveys. And what I've seen, I think it really depends on the context in which you're requesting the information. So if people are participating in a study and they're getting paid for it, they have, you know, the $25 incentive or whatever the case may be, then I think we get pretty good completion rates on an online survey, even if it's long. But if it's something where you're tracking data or it's for administrative purposes or compliance, auditing, things like that, where they might not be receiving incentives or maybe they're just not that motivated to do the survey, typically short and sweet, as Kathyn said, tends to be far more successful. But I'll let others chime in on what their experiences have been.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that, one of the articles we reviewed on text message surveys suggested considering a modular approach, so breaking it up into 2 or 3 different sections, and they found higher response rates to that with certain demographics, moms being one of them, right? Like, moms don't want to take a whole lot of time at once. So that's a consideration. But yeah, again, I would echo what Shauna said with regards to thinking through the motivation level of the people that you are asking these questions of. So if it's, if they're motivated based on a compensation or incentive, or just based on their commitment to the program that you're running, or, you know, the community that you're trying to support, you're probably going to get a greater willingness to answer more questions than if it's just sort of a random survey of residents that don't have a commitment to your organization or the topic that you're talking about.
There is a feature in Qualtrics, I know for sure, I'm not sure if anyone can chime in on some of the other survey platforms, but if you have folks' individual email addresses, you can send them personalized links. And so then that way they can click on their own link and then it saves their information even if they don't submit it. So if you have a particularly long survey, you may want to think about doing individual links rather than just one anonymous link and sending it to folks, because then they can start the survey, answer a few questions, and then come back to it later, and they don't have to worry about losing that data. So that's just one tool. I'm not sure if anybody knows, other than Qualtrics, some of the other platforms have that, but that could also be another strategy to getting folks to answer some longer questions if you don't want to break it up, but you just want to have them be able to come back to it over the course of a couple days, or if they want to check in with someone on a question or something, like consult with a colleague or a coworker if it's something more broad about an agency. So it's just another idea as well, is to send some individual links rather than one link that everybody can click on.
Yeah, great point. Lisa, do you want to take the microphone now to close us out? It looks like we're nearing the top of the hour.
Sure, happy to do that. Thank you all once again for joining us. I'm Lisa Greco, and I'm the program manager for the Program Evaluation Group, and I'm happy to serve as a single point of contact to help navigate through maybe the University of Michigan School of Social Work and connecting with us as an evaluation partner for work that you may have coming up. I want to thank our staff and student team. It really was a team effort. We have 3 students who are graduating. Congratulations, our 3 graduates. And thank you for your work on this project. So in closing out, we really are delighted that you could join us. And also we would like to have you join us in co-creating the next webinar in this series. So that's the poll that's coming out on your screen right now. We would like to build the next webinar content based on your priorities and your needs for guidance in what we create for you and with you. So please complete this last poll so that we can build the content around you. And as we mentioned earlier, you're helping us really move toward fulfilling our mission and our goals, which is to be a good community partner on behalf of the School of Social Work and support evaluation needs that you might have. Our contact information is in the slides, as I said, and I'm the one who's been sending you emails, so I'm also happy to be your single point of contact and can help shuffle you through the system at U of M if you're looking for assistance from us with evaluation work. And I think that will wrap it up for us today. So thank you for joining us and have a great weekend, everybody.